This is Michael Woodward, and this is episode 69 of the Jumblethink podcast.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Jumblethink podcast, a podcast focused on telling the stories of dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers. Along the way, we'll give you, the listener, some tips and ideas of how you can chase your own big idea and create the world you want to live in. Our guest on today's podcast is Leonard Kim. More about Leonard in a moment. On Thursday's episode, our guest is Richard Schickman. He is the creator of the RSR Project. His company creates tribute cars, a tribute to the 1973 Porsche RSR. It's a specific model of 911s. Super cool cars. I checked one out in person, and it's impressive what they're building. Their slogan is "Live the Dream, Own the Legend." It is a fun company. They're doing some cool stuff. So make sure to check that episode out this Thursday. We love creating this podcast for you. It's a lot of fun to share the stories of our incredible guests, their dreams, their ideas, and how they're getting there or how they've achieved that big idea. We want to make sure that more people hear about this podcast, and one of the ways that you can help us is to leave us a review. It's easy to do. Swing on over to wherever you listen to your podcast, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher Radio, iHeart, TuneIn, wherever you listen to your podcast, and just simply leave us a review there. It helps others see that there are people that love this podcast. We have some great reviews on there already, but we want to let our listeners hear your voice and opinion about the podcast too. So go on over wherever you listen to this podcast, leave us a review. We'd love to hear what you think of this podcast. Now, let's jump into our interview with today's guest, Leonard Kim. Today's guest is Leonard Kim. I am super excited about having Leonard on the show. It's a lot of fun chatting with him. You may have caught his TEDx talk or read one of his articles in Forbes, Fortune, Entrepreneur, Huffington Post, Los Angeles Times, GQ, Business Insider, Newsweek, BBC. You get the idea. He's written in a lot of places, and a lot of people have written about him. He's got great content out there. He's the managing partner of Influence Tree, and his content has been viewed or read over 10 million times. It's a super fun episode, so let's jump into our conversation with Leonard Kim. I am super excited about today's guest. I've been following him for a couple years now, read tons of his articles. He is a super content creator, creating amazing content, but lots of it. And so really a privilege to have Leonard Kim on the show today. Thanks for taking time to sit and share your story.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. What are we going to talk about today?
Oh, it's summer. Let's talk about ice cream.
Oh, my God. This is like my favorite topic. Desserts, sweet things. Oh, this is like the perfect podcast to be on. Oh, where should we start?
What's your favorite and what's your least favorite?
I think my favorite is probably pralines and cream, or maybe pistachio. It's one of those two.
Okay.
The ones that you could get at Baskin Robbins because they're all across the country. So you're never without it,
And what's the one flavor that you never want to taste again?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's really hard. I had one that tasted like lavender. That was kind of weird. I went to this place called Salt and Straw. Their ice cream's fantastic. They even have an avocado flavored ice cream.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah.
But they had this one that tasted like lavender, and what it tasted like is they got like the plants, stuffed it into ice cream, and I'm like, wait. Why am I drinking something that smells like perfume?
Yeah. When I lived in Northern California, there was a lavender field not far from where we were. I never thought, like, when I passed it, when I smelled it, I never thought, hey, this is something I want to taste.
It's kind of weird to taste. It's like, perfume, yum.
Well, ice cream is a great summer treat. When was your first time falling in love with ice cream?
Oh, it was probably back when I was growing up. Like, my grandfather, he used to take me to, is it called A&W?
Yeah, they have the frosty mugs.
Yeah, like back in the day, like there used to be these A&Ws set up. I mean, there weren't that many of them, and I don't think there's any that exist now. But then they used to sell like root beer floats, and like we used to go ride bikes and go and get them. Oh, so amazing!
They are actually having a resurgence of A&W. If you're on 80, I think it's 80, just west of Sacramento in Davis and Fairfield area. There's a couple there, and then there's one in Roseville just north of Sacramento, and there's a couple throughout the country. When we would live on the West Coast, when we were going from Northern California, Southern California, of course, for the famous Disneyland trips, we would find A&Ws all along the route. So they still exist. You should go find one.
Interesting. Maybe I should go look. I have a new goal now.
Well, ice cream isn't what our podcast is about, but it is fun to talk about. Let's dive into ideas and where they come from and how we can create a better world.
So ideas actually start in the shower, believe it or not.
Well, talking about showers, let's talk about taking showers in the dark. Not all of our listeners, probably most of them, aren't going to know your origin story of how you went from average Joe or somebody struggling to make it through life to the marketing megastar you've become.
Well, I mean, if we want to go back to the showering days, back when I was showering in the dark, like there was a time in my life where all I wanted to do was go out there and do something big, you know, revolutionary. But then it was really, you know, just meaning make a lot of money for myself. if you want to like leave it to be cut and dry. But it wasn't really revolutionary, the things that we were trying to do. It was just what could make the most money for me. And if you asked me about my passions would be like, you know, laying around, watching TV and things like that. So when it came to business, it's like, follow your passions. Follow your passions means be broke. So I'm like, maybe I have to find something that makes a lot of money instead. So I went out and I tried to do all these different things. Like I worked at a music startup. I worked at an entertainment startup. Real estate for all these different random things. I can't list them all because it's all over the place. I mean, the good thing about that is it gave me a wide view of different different perspectives out there because I've been in so many different industries, which gives a good bird's eye view. The bad thing is I wasn't really a specialist at anything. I started out doing sales, but I moved into marketing, and I was really trying to figure things out, but all these companies, like you've heard the statistics, 95% of startups fail within their first 5 years.
Yeah.
When that many fail, chances are if you do 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 or 15 or 20, you're going to be on that bottom portion of those results.
Yeah.
So, I mean, after failure, I was like, you know what? I could beat these odds. And I'm like, wait, no, I can't beat these odds. No, these odds are all that exist. No, there's not even a point in trying anymore. And I got so discouraged to the point where I was like, you know, I didn't really have energy to try anything anymore. So I stayed at home in bed and had difficulty just getting up every single day. And I'm like, what should I do? No, work? Lay in bed. I'll pick that instead. And it was just such a hard place for me to be in that for 6 months straight, I didn't pay my electricity bill. So, you know, it went like, and the lights were off and I'm like, oh, cool. I'm in the dark now. And I went to my fridge. I'm like, oh, I guess I have to eat as much of stuff that's in here as possible because I'm going to have to throw out the rest. So luckily, I have no idea how the water worked, but that water worked, so I was able to take showers in the dark. But, you know, had to go to 7-Eleven to get my microwavable food. Go, oh, wait, no power. Let's drag the microwave into the hallway of the apartment complex just to charge up my burrito and things like that.
Wow.
Yep. That's the shower time. That's the dark showers.
So how did you transition from dark showers to finding a voice that really was you? How did you make that transition?
Well, things didn't really get better right away. They got worse, then they started getting a little better, then they got worse, then they started getting a little better. But back in 2013, I was working at American Honda, earning about $16.24 an hour in California. That's basically poverty.
Yeah.
So I was like, this is great. I got to take this bus to work. I got to take this bus home. I actually have to walk 10 minutes to the subway station.
Wow.
Get on the subway. Then I have to get off that subway in downtown LA, hop onto the bus that got on the freeway. That bus will drop me off somewhere else. I have to take another bus to get to my work. Then I have to walk 10 minutes to get to work. So I got 20 minutes of exercise in the morning. I guess that's good.
Wow. Yeah.
Then like on the way home, like what would happen is I'd have to run. I have 8 minutes to get to the bus stop or I miss it. And if I missed it, I have to sit around for like an hour, trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah.
And it was like a 50-50 chance whether I got on the bus or not. And I got off work at 5 p.m. and I usually get home at 7. Unless I missed the bus, I get home at like 8.
Wow.
And that kind of sucked. But, it was just what I had to deal with every day with what I was earning. Then all of a sudden, like this new tax came out and $80 was gone out of my paycheck.
That's crazy.
And I was like, oh, that was my lunch money. Can't buy my $1.60 quesadilla anymore. This kind of sucks.
Yeah.
So at that point, I kind of got sick and tired of being sick and tired because I wanted to, eat something. So I went out there and I'm like, I'm going to put my all into something and see what sticks. So tried 3 different things, tried applying for hundreds of jobs, got a few interviews. No one hired me because my resume was full of broken hopes and dreams. They're like, there's only one company we recognize here, and that's Honda. Yeah. You don't do anything important there. Then I tried going back to school, but it takes years for school to pan out.
Right.
And I just was like, oh, maybe I'll just try this writing thing. I always liked writing. I sent girls love notes in high school, and they're like, ew, why are you sending this thing to me? And I got C's in English, so I never really thought I was good at writing, but may as well give it a try. Gave it a try, and next thing you know, within 6 months, I had like 2 million reads, a year and a half, 10 million. Then it started compiling, wrote for some publications. Then later, as it progressed even further, some publications were like, oh, this guy's great at this stuff. So I'm like, oh, cool, okay, I'll take it. Now I don't shower in the dark anymore.
I hope not. I mean, with the amount of exposure you're getting from sharing this great content, you've really found a voice, and you've become an expert in personal branding and branding as a specialist. Of course, you have a really great TEDx speech that you shared about facing your fear and using fear to guide you, which is a really cool conversation. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Tell us a little bit about what a personal branding expert does or a branding specialist does and how you help people on their journey.
Sure. So what we do is we really help people craft their backstories, because a lot of companies out there, what they do is they lead with their company, right?
Yeah.
IBM, Intel, Apple, et cetera, or not Apple, IBM, Intel, Cisco, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. List goes on forever.
Yeah.
And you have to buy into the company first, then you have to buy into the person. Let's say I'm on Google and I'm looking for like someone to help me manufacture products in China or something. I'm on Google, 10 results come up. There are 10 different like brokers or manufacturers. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing here, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I wanted to go out there and I wanted to hire the expert in the space. I'd have to go and hunt and look for them and to call all these companies and figure out which ones I can trust. And let's say I called 30 different companies. Would I really even know which one I could trust, or would they all seem the same and would it be like a coin toss?
Absolutely.
A 30-sided coin toss on which one you pick.
You're hoping for the best option and that you guess right.
Yeah. So there's another way to do things. If you're those Chinese manufacturers, you're screwed because you just might get lucky. It's all a luck game. But you could flip that situation around. Back when I used to do sales in 2005, I was taught the 10 steps of a sale. Step 1 was meet and greet. Step 2 was sell yourself. Step 3 was sell your company. Step 4 was qualify, and so forth. So if you look at that situation, when people leave with their companies, they're starting at step 3. Is that something that's really going to help you convert? Probably not. So what do you have to do? You have to flip it right side up and lead with the person instead. So let's say I like you. I like what you're about. I saw that you like ice cream. I like ice cream too. We made a connection. I read your content. I got to know you, and I got to read something that said, where you talked about your leadership in your industry and shared some maybe inside knowledge that most of the world doesn't know about your industry. And while looking at it, I'm like, oh, this guy's probably the expert. He knows what's going on. Now, let's say I'm looking for a Chinese manufacturer too at the exact same time. Chances are I'm going to look at the other landscape and be like, okay, there's all this crap out there.
Yeah.
But then this person knows what they're doing, and I trust that person. What's the chances that that person's going to earn my business?
A lot higher.
Yeah, a lot higher. It's not 100%, but it's a lot higher. So that's what we basically do. We go out there, we help people tell their stories, help them relate to others, help them make that personal connection, and we go out there and drive results.
Okay, so let's step back. You talked about leading from your company or leading as a personal brand. And there's some people out there, they're entrepreneurs. They might have a small team. They might be a marketing person doing TV ads, or maybe they're a photographer, or maybe they create a product or service. Mm-hmm. How is a personal brand different than a corporate brand? And what are the benefits of an executive or a salesperson differentiating themselves as that specialist? Some companies will look at that and say, oh, you're building your own empire. But how does that benefit that individual? How does that benefit the company?
So I was talking to a company earlier last week, and they put me on some top influencer list, and they're like, we're having some trouble figuring out how to position ourselves. And she started describing exactly what they were doing. And I'm like, okay, so it's basically Salesforce. She's like, yeah, it's Salesforce on steroids. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, cool. That kind of makes sense. So they have 3 things that what they're trying to do is they're trying to have one platform integrate between customer service, sales, and marketing, because in most big companies, these 3 departments don't communicate with each other, even though they should, but I don't know why. There's corporate structure, blah, 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 blah. They just end up in their own 3 separate silos. Yeah. And I'm just sitting there going, why don't you guys do this? You guys have multiple leaders on your organization. Pick one leader, have them become the thought leader in the sales space. Have the second leader become the thought leader in the marketing space. And have the third leader become the thought leader in the customer service call center space. Go have them create content on all 3 of these platforms as the entry points. And when you get back to the company brand, that's where you can tie your integrated solution together. Kill all the buzzwords, but start with each point. So now, just like your example, why should I go out there and do this? These 3 people are positioning themselves as leaders in the field. 1, so they get reputation. 2, so they can get credibility. And 3, so they can drive revenue back to the business. So if you have 3 leaders there, let's say after a year, leader A becomes one of the top 10 industry experts in sales. Right. If you needed something for a sales solution, guess what? Chances are you might go to him. Yeah. Then you have inbound leads instead of going out there and calling companies and being stuck on a 6 to 12 month sales cycle. Yeah. That never ends.
Never ends.
Yeah. I mean, I've dealt with enterprise sales on the purchasing side, and, there's so many companies that call you, and then it's like, okay, I'll probably pick this one, but I still have to talk to the other vendor because I have to put something else in my comparison chart to justify why I'm buying this product. And all these companies get strung along, and it's a really hard sales process. So what if you could flip it around and have people come to you and go, I want what you have?
Now, that's at the corporate level. Can a small entrepreneur, maybe a solopreneur, position themselves as a thought leader through a personal brand and have the same kind of impact that a big corporation would have, even using that strategy to position themselves as thought leaders in their segments, marketing, sales, in this example? Can a small business, a solopreneur or whatever like that, stand out in a saturated market like that too?
Of course. It's probably easier for the small business to do it because there's less red tape, less things that they can't say, and they could be more of themselves. So it makes it a little bit easier for them to move up. Like when you start dealing with the bigger and bigger companies, they get a little scared. They're like, oh, that's a little too personal for me to share, you know, and they're like, oh, I'm not sure about how this is going to make us perceived and things like that. So when you're at the smaller level, you just have to just take action. And with the landscape now, you just have to make sure you're differentiated from other people. Like you've heard leaders out there who go hustle hard, go out there and create lots and lots of content. Yeah. So what happens is you have hundreds and hundreds of people writing the same content that all looks the same. It's like 5 tips to go out there and get fit. Step 1, do squats. Step 2, do jumping jacks. Step 3, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, it's all the same. But how are you going to distinguish yourself from the rest? I mean, you could go out there and you could really just drive more personal experiences into it, back your stuff with research, and develop out actual true thought leadership as opposed to just going out there and tossing something and hoping it sticks.
So it's the difference of having a strategy, having the background to back it up versus going, here's some spaghetti, I'm going to toss at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you could try tossing things to the wall and see what sticks. Chances are you're going to have a rude awakening and be like, oh, this is not working. Or you could go out there and you could really develop out your true expertise. A lot of people I see are scared to really share what they know because they think other people are going to go out there and steal it.
Right.
That's why if they were going to steal it, they can't afford you anyways.
Well, let's dive deeper into this, because one of the things you said about, like, it's easier for that smaller entity or individual than a big corporation. And one of the things you mentioned there was that there's this fear of like, oh, this is too personal. And one of the things I love about you and your story is at least the perception, and, you know, maybe you'll speak to this a little bit, but is that there's a serious level of transparency, vulnerability, and honesty in the story that you share about you and what you're doing and how you incorporate yourself into your message. Mm-hmm. So the first part, I guess, of this question is how can we have that level of transparency and honesty and vulnerability, which is a very scary place to be, and fight the urge to do what so many people do in the social spheres and put a persona of what they want people to perceive them as. And is there a divide of that? And how do you solve that?
Of course, there's a great divide for that. So many people out there are like, you know what? I'm going to paint myself like this person. It's like, okay, but that's not you. So what are you going to do? Be fake for the rest of your life online? And when people meet you in real life, they're like, you know, Matt, I mean, that you're going to lose your sale once that happens anyway. So what's the point of even faking it?
Yeah.
I mean, some people, if they're real, they're going to chase people away too, because they might be cocky, arrogant, a jerk, condescending, things like that. They have to go work on themselves first. And like make sure that other people aren't portraying them that way, because if other people are portraying them that way, then once you go online, people are going to think the exact same thing. So you figured out what you need to fix. How do you go out there and figure out how to position yourself and share that transparency? Number one, it's going to be scary. If you're doing anything great in your life, anything that's worth doing, it's going to be scary. You're going to be scared. You're going to have more fear than anything else. If you're like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever, and you're excited and you're gung-ho about it, chances are it's probably going to fail. So if I were you, I would use fear as an indicator that you're onto something great, something that's going to connect with others, something that's going to resonate, something that's going to build trust, build a story, and have people really buy into who you are. So you have fear, that's your indicator. So you have to recognize exactly what it is that you're afraid of too. Like, are you really scared of telling your story, or are you scared of being judged for what your story entails?
Yeah.
Are you really scared of telling your story, or are you scared of that one time when your mom said you're worth nothing to me? Yeah. It's like, what are you really scared of? It's not the action, it's the perceived result from a past experience. What's that past experience that's holding you back? You have to recognize it, and you have to kind of face it. And it's going to be really scary because you're like staring at something that scares you, and no one wants to really stare at something that scares them.
That's true.
And like, do I want to like run away now? Do I want to freeze up and let this car just run over me? Like that's what most people do, and that's how I spent most of my life doing things. But then you could go and just DSA and just do something about it and go out there and do something. Because guess what? That fear is artificial. You don't know what's going to happen in the future. You're predicting the future, and guess what? How many experts out there can predict the future? I mean,
accurately?
One might get lucky. I mean, the world's going to end one day. One day. You can say one day and you're okay, right? I'm going to die one day.
Yeah.
You can predict things like that as long as you don't put dates next to it. But, I mean, for a real accurate picture, I mean, like when I first started out, like, look, people are going to call me a loser. They're going to mock me, ridicule me, all these other things. And I'm like, I got scared. I wanted to run away. When I was about to put my first post up, I sat there for about 30 minutes, like trembling, shaking. I told someone else who was writing something to just put it up. And right after she posted it, she started crying.
Oh, wow.
She was so scared.
Oh, my goodness.
So it is going to scare you. You just have to just do it. But after she did it, she was happy she did it. A few hours after she did it, she was happy she did it.
Yeah.
So you're not going to be happy immediately after, but you're going to see the results afterwards. And if you're scared about something that you've created, then that means you're onto something good. If you're not scared, then you probably need to put more work into it.
Yeah, and there's not that emotional tie to it either. If you're not feeling the fear or the pain of producing something and releasing it to the world, then your emotions aren't tied into it. You really aren't standing behind it.
Yeah, it's like just talking instead of talking with a purpose.
You did a TEDx talk, and it's awesome. It talks about this very topic, letting your fears guide you. And as I was watching that, a couple things stood out to me, and I wanted to ask you about them. The first was, and it's a little different because it's not necessarily focused on the main topic of your TED talk, but it was, you mentioned about how culture shapes us for failure, whether it's the American dream or whether it's expectations. And you talk about the truth of the American dream a little bit. And so I wanted to ask you is, how has culture, I'm in that pocket between a millennial and a Gen Xer. You're probably closer to the millennial. How has culture impacted us as a generation and shaped us for failure instead of success?
Well, the problem is most people are results oriented, right?
Okay.
They're like, if I do this, I'll get this, right? So they go and do this, then they don't get this. So what ends up happening? You get disappointed, right?
Yeah. Input, output, but you're not getting the output from the input you expected.
Yeah. And that's what people do. They put an expectation on every single thing that they do. Like if you look at the baby boomers, when they were told to work, they just worked, right? And then just because they kept working, they ended up in some high position, right?
Yeah.
they're like, I never expected to be up here. I just worked because I was taught to work. Yeah. And they kind of have that culture where they just follow through with things like millennials, Gen X, whatever, Gen Y, Z. Like we kind of want to take a shortcut.
Yeah.
We want to take the easiest route possible to get there. But, I spent most of my life taking shortcuts. And most of my life, I ended up back where I started with nothing. Wow. Actually, I ended up worse than I started with less and less and less. And that's kind of what happens when you take shortcuts.
How do we know when we're on the right path and we should persevere then? And when do we know that, hey, this path isn't ever going to amount to anything and we should divert and reassess and reposition? I mean, how do we make that shift and know, we're only a month from having the breakthrough that we're wanting. We just got to keep pushing at it. Or if we give 6 more months, or versus, no matter what amount of input, this still isn't going to get the results we want. So how do we overcome that?
That's a great question. So if you're going out there doing anything, of course you want it to work. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it. But if you get into something, you kind of have to go into it with no expectations. Like, take your KPIs, take all that and put it off the window. And first, I just start with feedback. Is this something that people even want? And figuring that out. Like, for me, when I started Influence Tree, we had an article go up in Entrepreneur, Inc. and Fortune within a 30-day time frame. Wow. And 1,000 people came back to visit the site, and 100 people saw pricing, and they're like, you know what, I want in. So, interest. Yeah. Should we make this business? Maybe. I mean, it was like, okay, the market says they want it, so yeah, let's make it, because we weren't going to start anything if the market didn't want it, because that's kind of what you do first. You make sure that the market wants it. There's a need for it. Okay. And if you're going out and you're trying to build something and you haven't tested to see if the market even wants it, guess what? It's time to go see if the market wants it.
So these are like little micro experiments. Maybe you go, hey, I have a topic I want to write about or podcast about or whatever it is. I'm just going to do a short burst to see kind of the results and impact I get back based on like a little micro experiment. Hey, I'm going to commit to this for 3 months, see if there's some fruit here to move forward and pick and then grow, if you will.
Yeah, basically, like, no one becomes a marathon bike rider overnight. No one even thinks, oh, I'm going to become a marathon bike rider one day. They hop on their bike when they're 7 years old. They have it with training wheels. They fall over a few times. They kind of get good at it. They kind of get better at it. They're like, oh, I really like biking. Oh, maybe I should turn this into a profession. Maybe I should go and do this full time. That's kind of like how people fall into things where they actually love them. Like me, riding, I'm like, oh, I'm not good. I never thought I was going to be like a good writer. I just was like, oh, I just need something to deliver these tragic stories about my life on. So I'm like, oh, let's just see if this works. And then you just get better and better and better at it. And now I'm able to charge a lot per crafting out stories for people. And it just becomes more and more and more. It's kind of great.
Yeah. We live in a super saturated content market. I mean, that's one of the struggles with traditional media, with television, radio, other places like that. There's just a sheer amount of content being created in the time that we live. So first question is, how can we keep up with an ever-evolving new media landscape, whether it's through social media? I mean, here's a great example. We go from MySpace to Facebook, that's an evolution. Now Twitter and Instagram and Snapchat, and now there's things like Anchor, and all of these social media avenues are just evolving, changing, growing, and becoming saturated so quickly. How do we stand out in those spaces?
So if you want to make money online, you have to be an expert at 2 platforms.
Okay.
So, I mean, you could go out there and you could chase every single new one, and you could go test and lead one in the future. Or you could just stick to what you know, focus on 2, really build those out, and get a solid presence on them. I mean, some people like chasing the golden goose. Other people like to do what works. So, I mean, if you like to go on the wild goose chase, go for it, have fun. But if you don't get anywhere, then that's kind of what happens, because what's the failure rate for businesses? 95%. So 95% of your effort kind of vanishes as well. If you stick to the tried and true platforms, they're going to be around for a while. So you just have to learn how to master them.
So in this case, in a saturated market where there's a lot of different platforms, you would say, hey, maybe just pick Facebook and Instagram and use those as your avenues to connect with your audience. Or, hey, if you really are killing it at Twitter, maybe you're focused at Twitter and maybe you're doing Snapchat. But just focus in on being the best at a smaller segment of those channels instead of trying to be a master or a generalist on all of them.
Yeah, what did they say? Something, master of none.
Yeah. Jack of all trades, master of none.
Oh, yeah, jack of all trades. Jack, my friend Jack. He's such a jack.
And the next question I had for you based on content is you put out a lot of content. You're writing a lot. How do you choose the content that's going to resonate with your audience, but also just get kind of that social traction, that viral growth with it?
So when you're writing content, if you want to, I didn't do any of this stuff. I just wrote. So if you want to strategically do something, you could use tools like BuzzSumo and type in like a word like motivation, success, whatever, and it'll tell you like how much articles are shared. So within like a year period. So you could see, oh, this article got shared 50,000 times. That probably means it went viral. What about this article made it go viral? You examine the headliner, you examine how it's written, what it talks about, and you start to get data. Then you could go look for other articles that went viral, and you're like, oh, what made this go viral? What made that go viral? Then you could kind of reverse engineer exactly how to make your own content go viral based off of what's out there.
That's really, really cool. You write a lot of articles about creating a niche or niche or however you say that word. No one seems to know. Everyone has opinion on that.
The word's niche, and I don't know if I have one because I don't know which ant to talk to.
Well, you talk about it a lot. How does that help a person with a personal brand stand out?
Well, everyone has to have at least one thing that they really hone in on and they're known for. Because I see a lot of people, they want to write about flowers, then gardens, then landscaping, then they wanted to go and talk about home design, decorations. Then they want to talk about business here and there. And it's okay to go and talk about everything, but you just have to be solidified in one key area, and that has to be your niche. Like me, I chose personal branding, so I could go talk about anything I want, but when they come back, they're like, oh, he does personal branding.
Yeah.
So when you find your niche, that kind of solidifies exactly what you want to be known for. You can have hobbies, you could have interests. Like you could love gardening and be a business owner and talk about going out there and doing finance. You could do that. You just have to make sure that on your profiles and everything, you're positioning yourself in some kind of finance role.
You mentioned Influence Tree, which is a really, really cool tool. You have some curriculum there, some other tools there. Tell us about Influence Tree, what it does, and how it's going to help our listeners become the expert that they want to be. So I met my business partner, Ryan Fullen, back in October of 2015 at Keith Ferrazzi, the author of Never Eat Alone, his house. And he has this interesting thing where he's like, oh, have everyone talk about what they need help with, then talk about what they do. So you start with your vulnerabilities. I'm like, oh, this is easy. This is all I do all day. But then to everyone else, it's like, wow, this is such a new concept. And like Ryan talked about what he needed help with. I talked about what I needed help with. We were both wearing bow ties. And he was thinking, whoa, cool, there's someone else with a bow tie. And I'm thinking, who's this douche who stole my bow tie idea? So we started talking, and he's like, dude, I really want to build my personal brand. And I'm like, okay, tell me exactly what you want to know. Find 52 things and write them all down. So he writes it down. I turn it into a curriculum. And I'm like, okay, let's position them in the exact order that they need to go in. Then I go and I help Ryan build his personal brand. Within a year and a half, Ryan's hit over 200,000 social media followers. He's been featured in Inc., Forbes, Fortune, Huffington Post, Entrepreneur. He's done 2 TEDx's, more than me. He's spoken all across the world in Haiti, China, Beijing, Hong Kong, Colombia, Portugal, and all these other places. And he's really taken off with his brand, and he's made a lot more money than he did beforehand. Yeah. So what I did was I taught him how to do everything. And in the first series of videos that we did, it was kind of like me teaching him how to do all these steps. Okay. But now he kind of learned everything too, right? So we redid all the videos with him talking more about what he learned through the process. That's cool. So what we do is we take all those lessons that we learned,
on how to build that massive positioning and successful following. Kind of like when I asked Ryan, what do you want to be known for? He's like, well, I'm good at this, and he can name like 20 different things. I'm like, no, go pick one. And we built him up for, he's had a lot of success. And with the people who end up taking the course, they kind of see similar results. With people who we work with one-on-one, they kind of get really good results. So we have this platform set up for people out there who really want to go in, build up that personal brand in the right way.
That's really cool. You mentioned that your business partner has had a lot of accolades. You also have. You've been on Forbes, Fortune, Entrepreneur, Huffington Post, Los Angeles Times, GQ, Business Insider, Newsweek, BBC, so many other places. You've been recognized by tons of different awards for being an influencer and an educator around influence. How do you measure success?
How do you measure success? I think I just asked you back the same question.
Well, I guess the better way to ask that is, for you personally, what does success look like and how do you quantify it?
Well, so the thing with life is it's really hard to feel successful. It's not like a destination where you're like, oh, I made it. I'm here. I'm successful now. It's just like a journey, and you just keep going. Like, for me, I have the same kind of questions that everyone else asks themselves, like, what in the world am I doing with my life? I ask myself that a lot.
Wow. Okay.
I'm like, oh, what am I doing with my time? Is this the best use of it? When am I going to die? Is it going to be tomorrow? Is it going to be next year? Is it going to be 100 years from now? And what's next in life? I mean, those are kind of like the main questions. Like, what am I doing? What's next? And when am I going to die? And then, like, I never really have a solid answer to these questions. I just go with it. But the crazy thing is, since I've tried to adapt this philosophy of not having expectations, sure, I screw up every now and then and have an expectation and have extreme disappointment. But while trying really, really hard to adapt and fully utilize this concept, I mean, I've been able to pull clients from like big companies. We have this small company called Cisco that we work with.
Yeah.
We'll probably have one of the big 3 consulting firms working with us, and just like things like that just happen.
So it almost sounds like you're saying, don't chase the success, just create awesome stuff. Just be present where you're at and keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I mean, like, I like to use this example. Once I had 2 million views, like, if you sat down with me on May 15th, 2013, and you said, Leonard, if you start writing today, you're going to have 2 million views by December 31st, 2013, I'd be like, F you, you're joking. Get out of here.
Yeah.
But then, because I wrote, because I went out there and did something every day, because I created the right habits, I was able to go, whoa, how in the world did I get 2 million views on my content? But because I had no expectations and I just worked, I did what it took. I made the habits. I went out there and created content every day. That's how I was able to result into that. But in hindsight, it was like, whoa, I would have never known that just by writing this would have happened. So if you just stick to doing, Robert Kiyosaki has this philosophy called be, do, have. Okay. You have to be the person you need to be, blah, 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 which means not being cocky, arrogant, and all that. Then you just have to do what it takes. Then you'll have what you want. But most people just skip out or think that when they do, they're not going to hit it soon enough. Like me, I got frustrated a few times where I'm like, oh, I'm writing and I'm not making money from it yet. What's going on?
Yeah.
I've done this. Now I make more than I made from my job for a month to write like one thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of flips.
Yeah. Before we jump into our rapid fire questions, I have one final question, and that's you've been on an interesting journey. You went from a very broken place of no power, taking showers in the dark. We kind of started from that place to creating a recognition and a brand and a company around yourself. At the beginning of your journey, if you were to look back, what was one thing you wish you would know when you started?
Don't attack the trolls.
Okay.
So, one thing that I did is, like, I don't like to be bullied. I'll go and push back, right?
Yeah.
Just because I'm like, you can't talk to me like that. I'm going to push you down. And that's kind of like my personality in real life. So, and when people were doing that online, I did that too. And like, it kind of like hurt my image a little bit, where people were kind of scared. They're like, oh, so he'll go and slam someone down.
Wow.
Maybe you shouldn't have done that, but it was so much fun. I'm like, yeah, I can't be doing that, even though it's fun. So now I just ignore them.
That's really good advice. Let's jump into some rapid fire questions. These are questions I ask every guest on the podcast. So let's jump into them.
Okay.
What are some tips or a tip you would give someone with a big idea and a dream, and they simply don't know where to start?
You said this was a rapid fire session.
I'll let you interpret rapid. So you go where you want to go with that.
Rapid means I have to think. I thought this was like, what's your favorite food? Cookies, ice cream, cake.
Back to the ice cream. Back to the ice cream.
So one thing, if you have a big dream, where do you start? Good question. Start with you. So there's so many people, like if you read Simon Sinek's book or watch his TEDx talk, because I didn't read his book, and I don't
I'm with
really
you on
read
that
much. If you watch his talk, he says start with why. Why is a great place to start, but you should probably start with who instead. Who are you? What makes you important? What makes you different? What really distinguishes you from the rest? If you start with who, and you start with building yourself out, that would be the first step. Then you'll be able to slowly figure out how to incorporate your big passion into what you're doing and who you are.
So answer the question of identity.
Yep.
I think that's so important. I agree 100% with that. What's one change you would like to see in the world? It's a crazy place out there.
This isn't no rapid fire session. Equality and no hatred, but yeah, good luck with that. Yeah.
What do you want your legacy to be?
This really isn't a rapid fire session.
Maybe I should start with rapid fire in the future.
Maybe I did something that impacted people's lives. Hopefully. Maybe. People say it to me, but do I believe it? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know.
I know that you're definitely impacting people, so I think you're on that journey for sure.
Cool.
Who or what inspires you?
My grandfather.
You tell a cool story about your grandfather and how he inspires you in your TED Talk. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So my grandfather, he had Alzheimer's when I was in high school.
Okay.
And he started to forget who I was, so I started to forget who he was.
Wow.
Growing up, and it was really sad. But right before I started writing, like a year beforehand, I had a time of self-reflection when I broke my ankle for jumping over the fence, because I didn't realize I had the keys to my home in my pocket since I was too drunk. And I just got in an argument with my ex-girlfriend. So since I had 3 months to stay at home and really just think things over, I was able to start to remember my past, and I remembered how he raised me. Like, he used to always be there, not just for me and our family. He was there for the community. He always gave back. People loved him. He volunteered in the school cafeteria. He'd help everyone out in their times of need. And here's this guy who fought in 3 wars, retired from the Air Force, retired from the biggest steel manufacturer in the U.S., goes out there and still gives back to everyone.
Wow.
It's like, wow, what was I doing with my life? I was just thinking about me. Well, he came back. Maybe I should probably do what he did. So, yeah, that's kind of where I start. That kind of is what, like, planted the seed for me to start writing.
I think that's really good. You know, I think the more we interact at a social network, online, virtual community, the more we lose sense of authentic community, that face-to-face and the value of it.
Yeah. Like, people used to look at him with starry eyes. I'm like, no one looks at me with starry eyes. Nobody wants to talk to me. I'm doing something wrong.
That's really cool. It sounds like he was an incredible guy.
Yeah, he was.
What are you currently reading, watching, or listening to?
Dr. Diane Hamilton mailed me her book, and I told her I would read it. So it's not you, it's your personality. Skills to survive and thrive in the modern workplace.
Wow. That's a heavy book.
I was like, oh, I like this title.
Yeah, I do too.
It is your personality. You're not cool. So it was published in 2010.
Wow.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah, I read like 2 pages today in the morning. So yeah, I'll get through that in hopefully 2 months. Okay. Maybe 3. Maybe 5. How about this? I'll read this book this year. Let's just leave it there.
That's funny. I always end every episode with this final question. What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
What dream do I want to fulfill in my life?
Yeah.
I want a horse and a family.
That's cool.
You know,
why a horse?
Like I don't know. Have you pet a horse before?
I have.
So soft.
Yeah. They're beautiful animals.
They are. They're so soft. And they're so pretty.
Wow. That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I have for that.
Nothing wrong with that. How can somebody connect with you?
You can email me at hello@leonardkim.com. You can go to Twitter, Mr. Leonard Kim. Website's leonardkim.com. Business website's influencetree.com. And yeah, those are all the different places you could find me. So cool. So cool. Leonard, it has been a lot of fun having this conversation with you. And thanks for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it. Anytime, Michael. Thanks for reading my content and following me for years and going, hey, I'm going to bug you until you get on here. Well, it's been a lot of fun having you, and we wish you the best in everything you do. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Once again, I want to thank today's guest, Leonard Kim, for taking time out to share his story. Make sure you swing on over to jumblethink.com, where you can find in the episode notes links to all of Leonard Kim's contacts. On Thursday's episode, our guest is Richard Schickman. He is the founder of the RSS Project. They create tribute cars to the 1973 Porsche 911 RSR car. It's a super fun episode. Make sure you tune into that this Thursday. We release new episodes every Monday and Thursday morning, and we want to make sure that you never miss another episode. There's a couple ways you can do that. You can swing on over to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter and follow and like us there. You can also go to wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe to this podcast, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher Radio, iHeart, all those great places. You can swing on over and subscribe. You can also join our newsletter by swinging on over to jumblethink.com. Right there, you'll find a place where you can sign up for the newsletter. That way you'll know when every new episode comes out. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Make sure you go and create the ideas that you have, chase those dreams, and ultimately change the world around you. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps. Vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.